Adrian Holloway locked eyes with the waitress and froze. There was a mark on her face, subtle, but impossible to ignore, and the way she tried to hide it with a quick, trained gesture made it clear this wasn't nothing. It was the reflex of someone who's had to fake normal way too many times. He didn't ask. There was no small talk. Adrian just stared for a second and made a decision on the spot, cold, direct, irreversible. The waitress dropped her gaze and kept working as if her own skin wasn't screaming, as if the entire world was forbidden from noticing. But he noticed. And worse than that, he understood that bruise was just the tip of something much darker behind it. What nobody there knew is that from that moment on, Adrian was about to do something that would corner someone against the wall, and the truth was going to explode in a way nobody was ready to see. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, city, state, or country? Adrian Holloway, a finance tycoon who could buy almost anything in that city, sat alone in the quietest corner of a cafe in Boston, coat still damp from the drizzle, and a cooling cup of coffee between his hands. It was too early for noise, too late for optimism, and yet he'd come, not for the food, for the silence. Adrian always chose places where no one would stare for too long, as if his very presence might disturb other people's normal. The place smelled like cinnamon and fresh bread. Soft music played low enough to disappear into the background, and the calm in the air felt borrowed. He watched the street through the window without really seeing it when the waitress came over with a notepad in hand. Lena Parker, a young waitress with tired eyes and cautious posture, asked for his order in the soft voice of someone who learned not to take up space. Adrian answered on autopilot, but the next second, when she turned her face just a little, everything inside him locked. There was a bruise on the side of her face, quiet and cruel. It wasn't bad makeup. It wasn't a silly accident. It was the kind of mark skin keeps when someone insists on hurting it. Adrian didn't say anything, and neither did Lena, but his gaze stuck there, as if that single stain had lit up an old, badly buried memory. One small detail, the way she held her breath for a second, bracing herself like she expected to be judged, tightened his throat. If you like stories that look small on the outside but huge on the inside, hit subscribe and stay with us. A lot of people see scenes like this and just keep walking. But sometimes the difference between turning your head and really seeing changes everything. Adrian knew that kind of silence well. The silence of someone drowning in money, but starving in ways no one ever photographs. When Lena walked away, he tried to go back to his coffee, his messages, his normal world. He couldn't. Other customers laughed softly, talked about work, trips, light topics. No one seemed to notice anything. Adrian watched Lena wait one table, then another, always with that careful precision, like every move had to be perfect to avoid some invisible problem. And that's when he understood, with a physical discomfort. It wasn't just the bruise. It was the fact that she was right there, in front of everyone, and still seemed completely invisible. And Adrian, from the way he kept watching, already knew he wouldn't just pay the bill and walk away from this scene. Adrian Holloway left the cafe trying to convince himself it had all been in his head. He walked 2 blocks, got into his car, put his hands on the steering wheel, and never turned the engine on. Life outside kept moving, rushed people, distant horns, ordinary city noise. But inside, the scene wouldn't move. Lena's face, the bruise, and especially the way she tucked her pain away behind politeness. He went back the next day, and the next, and the next. Different times of day, same corner table, like it was a neutral zone where no one would ask questions. He watched without staring, grabbed his phone whenever she passed close, pretended to be reading something important. It wasn't cheap curiosity. It was an old restlessness, the kind that reminds a person they still have a heart. And every time Lena appeared, he noticed more details. Sleeves pulled down to her wrists, short smiles, the way she avoided ever being alone near the back door. On his third visit, Adrian struck up a casual conversation with Maya, the cafe manager, acting like he just wanted to compliment the place. He asked if Lena was new, if she lived nearby, if she had family around. Maya hesitated, that kind of hesitation you only see in people who already held back tears for someone. She said Lena worked double shifts, never missed a day, was going through some things. And only when Adrian gently mentioned a mark on her face did Maya lower her voice and finally say, she doesn't like people talking about it. There's this guy who won't accept it's over. Adrian didn't push her further. But once outside, sitting in his car, he made 2 quick calls, the kind of calls people like him make without realizing the weight. First, to Graham, his head of security, a former cop who never asked why, only how. Second, to Elena, a trusted attorney, asking for guidance without names, without drama, without turning it into a headline. He needed to understand the line between helping and crossing boundaries. And in just a few hours, the story started taking on a shape that hurt. Derek Vance, Lena's ex, had a record of aggression, kept showing up where she worked, and left messages that sounded like love but smelled like threat. The detail that twisted Adrian's stomach wasn't to even the man's name. It was learning that Lena wasn't the only one under pressure. She took care of Noah, her younger brother, a kid with special needs who depended on her for everything: school, meds, routine, protection. Her life was like a narrow hallway with no exit, and someone still kept blocking the door. Adrian sat in his car, watching the cafe from a distance, seeing Lena clear tables with her head down, and realized that if Derek showed up again, no one there would have the courage to step in, and that meant the next chapter could happen right in front of him. Lena Parker lived like the world was always half a second behind her. She left the small apartment before the sun was fully up, pulled Noah through his routine with a patience nobody ever saw, and then rushed to the cafe with the desperation of someone who knows she could lose her job over any little thing. On the outside, she did everything right. On the inside, it was like every step was calculated not to attract attention, because attention, for her, had become dangerous. The problem was, Derek Vance didn't need a reason to show up. Sometimes he appeared on the sidewalk, leaning against a post, hands in his pockets, wearing that crooked half-smile that looked like a joke, but his eyes were all demand. I just want to talk, Lena. Stop treating me like a monster. He'd say loud enough for her to hear, low enough that no one would get involved. When she ignored him, the tone would shift without the volume changing. I know where you work. I know where you go. You're going to answer me. She swallowed hard, pretended not to hear, and walked into her shift, with her heart beating too hard for a body that had to stand still. On her break, hiding near the stockroom, she'd check her phone like it was a map out of a maze. Missed calls, texts, voicemail notifications she refused to open because she knew his voice would keep echoing in her mind while she poured coffee for smiling strangers. And in the middle of that, there was her guilt over Noah. He needed her whole, and she was always cracked down the middle. Adrian Holloway recognized that kind of exhaustion because he lived with his own version of it. He came back again, took his usual corner, watched without intruding. When Lena passed his table, he didn't point out the bruise, didn't make a pity face, didn't try to play hero. He just asked in a low voice, "Are you sure you're okay to be here today?" She froze for a heartbeat, like no one had ever asked that question without expecting something in return. Her automatic answer came with a quick, practiced smile. "I'm fine. Thank you." but her hand shook as she picked up the tray, and Adrian caught the detail that gave everything away. She was gripping her own wrist to hide a newer mark. On his way out, he saw Derek from a distance at the corner, and the man's presence alone changed the air on the street. Derek didn't do anything dramatic, just stood there, watching, waiting for Lena to leave. Adrian didn't walk up to him, didn't start a scene. He just stopped and stayed visible, like a silent wall between them, until Derek realized he was being watched by someone who didn't look away. Derek backed off, but before he left, he stared at Lena through the window and made the smallest nod, like a promise. And that's when Lena understood something terrifying. He didn't have to show up at the cafe door. He could show up at her apartment door. That night, her phone would stay too close to her hand, one name lighting up the screen for far too long. That night, Lena Parker, the waitress who always seemed to be apologizing just for existing, got to the worn-out building where she lived with her younger brother and knew something was wrong before she even reached the door. The hallway was too quiet, like even the air was holding its breath. The ceiling light flickered twice, and before she could slide the key into the lock, she heard a muffled noise from inside, something dragging. A soft thud, like furniture being pushed. She cracked the door just enough to peek in, heart pounding in her throat, and saw a shadow move. There was no time to think. Derek Vance, the ex who refused to let go, was inside her apartment, moving around with that fake calm that was somehow more frightening than a scream. "You didn't think I wouldn't come, did you?" he said in a low, casual voice, as if they were talking about normal business. Lena slammed the door shut, grabbed Noah's hand, and stumbled down the stairs, not daring to look back. Outside, her hands shook so badly she almost dropped her phone. She didn't want to call the police and become the drama of the building. Not because she didn't deserve help, but because she had Noah. She was terrified of what might come after. In the middle of the panic, one name filled her screen. Adrian Holloway, the billionaire who sat quietly in the corner with his coffee, and too many unasked questions. She hit call, and when he answered, her voice came out broken. "He's in my apartment. I don't know where to go." Adrian didn't give her a speech. He didn't ask why she hadn't reported him before, didn't throw cliches at her, didn't demand a long explanation. He just said firmly, like the decision was already made, "Get out of there now. Go somewhere bright, with people. Send me your location." On his end, he was already on his feet, dialing Graham and telling him to come fast, quietly. No sirens, no spectacle. Adrian drove like a man who didn't care if the rest of the city noticed, because in that moment, the world was a luxury Lena simply didn't have. When they finally met at a gas station blazing with fluorescent lights, Lena was clinging to Noah, trying to look strong for him. Noah, confused and scared, buried his face in her jacket, whispering a little phrase that had calmed him when he was younger. Adrian pulled up, got out of the car slowly, and the first thing he did wasn't touch her. It was to crouch a bit, get on Noah's level, and say gently, "Hey, you're safe now." Then he looked at Lena and simply pointed to the back seat. "Come on, my place is close." No yelling, no questions tonight. Adrian's house was big, beautiful, quiet. But that night, it turned into something else. A place where no one was going to show up at the door, demanding anything. Lena walked in like the floor might crack. Noah collapsed onto a soft couch and stared around, wary. Adrian brought water, a blanket, set his phone on the table, and spoke softly. "We're going to do this the right way. Tonight, you just breathe. Tomorrow, we make a plan." And that's when Lena realized the hardest part hadn't even started yet. because for Derek to be out of her life for good, it wouldn't be enough to run. She'd have to face him. The rest of the night passed slowly, like time was afraid to make noise. Lena sat on the edge of the couch, body wired, listening to every crack, every settling sound in the house, like it might be footsteps at the door. Noah eventually fell asleep under the blanket, exhaustion finally winning after so many days of fear he couldn't name. Adrian didn't try to fill the silence with talk. He just stayed nearby, making tea, adjusting the thermostat, keeping the lights low, saying without words that no one here was going to demand anything from her. When morning came, Adrian went straight to the point. No boss tone, no pressure. "I called an organization that helps women in situations like yours," he said. "They've got a protocol, safe housing, legal support. And they do it without putting you on display." Lena laced her fingers together. The word protocol sounded too big for the small life she lived. She was afraid of becoming a statistic, afraid of Derek, afraid that reporting him would make everything worse. But the image of him inside her apartment, moving around like he owned the place, pushed her forward. A few hours later, they went together quietly to a local domestic violence center. A counselor walked her through everything slowly: how to file a report, how to request a restraining order, how to document threats, how to keep Noah safe. Lena listened with her eyes shining, not out of drama, but out of relief that someone finally treated this as serious. Adrian stayed in the background, respectful, making it clear he wasn't the hero of this story. He was just there, so she wouldn't have to go back into the dark alone. At one point, Lena had to say out loud things she'd never put into words. The first slaps, the first "I'm sorry, it won't happen again." The phase where she started blaming herself for everything. The slow, suffocating slide into living according to a man's mood. When she finished, the silence in that room wasn't awkward. It was protective. Then came the hardest step: signing the report, holding the pen with a hand that trembled on the inside, but stayed steady enough on the page to write the word enough. That same day, with the center's help, Lena entered a protection program. They arranged a safe place for her and thought through every practical detail: address, phone, routine, and all of it included Noah. School, doctors, a predictable schedule that didn't leave him floating in chaos. Slowly, Noah started to settle. With the return of predictability came something rare: a real smile. Lena watched her little brother play with some simple object, focused, not glancing at the door every time a sound echoed. And for her, that felt like finally surfacing after too long underwater. Later, drained but standing, Lena went back to Adrian's house to pick up Noah and a few things. She found Adrian in the kitchen, staring at an email like it was his own internal fight. He looked up and said only one thing: "You did the hardest part." Lena didn't respond with over-the-top gratitude. She just nodded, eyes clear. For the first time in a long time, she felt her feet under her solid ground instead of eggshells. Now she just needed to see how Derek would react once he realized she was no longer someone he could control with fear. In the days that followed, Lena's life turned into a series of small, deliberate steps. No big speeches, no movie-style transformation. It was waking up and checking that Noah was okay. It was opening the window and breathing without feeling guilty. It was walking down the street without looking over her shoulder at every intersection. The center kept in touch constantly, helping with paperwork, logistics, and mostly with the invisible weight of having lived under threat for far too long. Adrian stayed present, but in a rare way. He didn't show up with solutions and ultimatums. He didn't barge into her space. Sometimes he only sent a short message. "Did you eat?" Other times, he left a bag of basics at the front desk. No note, no performance. When Lena tried to thank him too much, he gently shut it down. "You don't owe me anything. I just couldn't pretend I didn't see it." That landed differently. It wasn't "I'm here to save you." It was "I'm here." Lena started helping out at the center, doing simple tasks, organizing donations, answering phones, guiding people to the right rooms. She didn't feel strong yet, but she felt useful. That started to rebuild something inside. When a new woman arrived shaking just like she once had, Lena didn't toss out pretty phrases. She brought water, found her a chair, and said quietly, "You're not overreacting. I know what this is like." Across the room, Adrian watched and grew even quieter, as if he was seeing in her a kind of courage he'd never been able to buy. Derek Vance didn't vanish overnight. There were indirect messages, attempts to reach her from unknown numbers, recados passed through people they both knew. The difference now was that every single thing was logged, recorded, handed over. Each new threat that once would have meant private panic now became evidence. Lena's heart still raced. There were still nights when her body remembered the fear before her mind remembered she was safe. But for the first time, she wasn't alone in that war. The heaviest moment came one afternoon when the center staff walked in with an update. The police had moved forward, pulled together her report, prior incidents, witnesses, and had taken action. Lena was holding a paper cup of coffee and the counselor said, "He's in custody." Lena didn't jump up and cheer. She didn't immediately cry from relief. She just froze, like her body had no idea what to do when danger finally stepped back. In the corner, Noah pulled off his headphones and asked quietly if they were going home. Lena knelt in front of him, cupped his face in both hands, and answered with a calm that surprised even her. "We're going to be okay." When she stood up, she caught Adrian watching from a distance, respecting the moment like it was sacred. There was no forced romance between them, no rushed promises. There was just one thing: presence. Still, deep down Lena knew she needed one last step, something symbolic that wasn't about Derek, but about her, about seeing herself differently than the girl who apologized for everything. When Lena Parker walked back into the cafe, the smell of cinnamon was still there. But she wasn't the same woman who once served coffee with a hidden bruise and an automatic smile. The place looked identical on the outside: wooden tables, pastry case, soft music. But on the inside, Lena noticed everything like the world had been lit differently. It wasn't perfect happiness. It was a hard-won calm, the kind that comes after long, raw fear. She stepped in slowly, testing the ground. No one there knew the size of what had happened offstage. A couple of regulars recognized her, waved, asked if she was okay. Lena answered simply, without oversharing. This time, she wasn't ashamed of existing. The uniform didn't feel as heavy. And when she walked past the same corner where a silent man had once sat watching, her heart thumped in a new way, not in panic, but in recognition. Adrian Holloway was already there. Same table, same reserved posture, but with one difference. He wasn't on his phone, wasn't pretending to read. He was just waiting. When he saw her, he stood up slowly, like he didn't want to startle anything fragile. For a few seconds, neither of them said a word. The kind of silence that used to feel like threat now felt like respect. Lena came closer and asked with a slight smile, "The usual?" Adrian let out a short breath, like he was finally letting something inside relax. "Today, anything's fine. I just wanted to see you," they said. They didn't say much, but everything they said was real. Lena talked about Noah, about how he was starting to care about things again, how a stable routine changes a whole body. Adrian listened with a focus that didn't feel like curiosity, it felt like care. At one point, he pulled a small box out of his pocket, way simpler than anyone would expect from a billionaire. No flashy logo, no oversized diamond, no spectacle. Just a quiet gesture from a man who spent his life buying things and still didn't. To know quite how to give something that wasn't money. He slid the box across the table. "I'm not good at doing this the pretty way," he said, voice low. "But I wanted to give you something, not to trap you, not to pay you back for anything. Just to mark what happened." Lena opened the lid with steady hands. Inside, there was a simple ring. On the inside, engraved in tiny letters, 2 words that hit harder than any romantic line. "I saw you." Lena closed her eyes for a second, like those words were reaching back through every wrong thing she'd ever been told about herself. She didn't jump into his arms, didn't turn it into a movie scene. She just looked at Adrian and for the first time, met his eyes without shrinking. "I'll accept it," she said. "Not because I needed this, but because today I can finally see myself too." Adrian nodded, almost overwhelmed, and slid the ring onto her finger gently, like he was returning something that had always belonged to her. Dignity. Right there, at that same table where it all began, the story wasn't sealed with luxury. It was sealed with recognition. When they left the cafe and night settled over Boston, there wasn't a perfect ending written in the sky. What hung in the air was something quieter. What comes next is no longer about running from fear, but about learning to live without it. Later that same night, the cafe buzzed back to its usual soundtrack low laughter. Clinking silverware, orders called out, but Lena walked out different. The ring didn't weigh on her hand. What weighed, in the best possible way, was something else. The rare sensation of no longer needing to shrink herself to fit into the world. Adrian Holloway walked beside her without rushing, like a man who finally understood that no amount of money can buy the peace of looking at someone and saying, without fancy words, "I'm here." He hadn't turned into a hero. He'd simply stopped being a coward about what he saw. And sometimes, that alone is enough to change an entire life. Lena touched her cheek where the bruise used to be and took a deep breath. It wasn't a perfect, happy ever after. It was a real beginning. And for the first time in a long time, the silence around her didn't feel like threat. It felt like space. And you, if you were in her place, would you have asked for help? And if you were in his, would you have pretended you saw nothing? What hit you hardest in this story? The mark on her face, the hidden fear, or the decision that changed everything? Tell me in the comments. And if you connected with this kind of story, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.